On Thanksgiving night, my mother-in-law laughed in front of the entire family. She's barren. She'll never give us grandchildren. I pressed my lips together, silently placing the white envelope in the center of the walnut dining table. When everyone stopped their forks and knives, the ultrasound image slipped out like a verdict. Someone gasped. Someone started crying. And me. For the first time, I felt stronger than any family curse. That night, the lakeside house grew colder than November weather, and the truth burned hot enough to sear. My name is Ava Hart, and I've been preparing for this Thanksgiving like a soldier preparing for war. The morning started with Dylan's back turned to me in our king-sized bed, his breathing deliberately even awake but avoiding conversation. 3 years of fertility treatments had taught us both the art of selective silence. I slipped out at 6:30 a.m. My period now, 12 days late, clutching an appointment card for Riverton Medical Center that I'd hidden behind old receipts in my wallet. "Don't get your hopes up," Dylan had mumbled when I'd first mentioned the missed period last week. "We've been through this before." His words had settled in my chest like stones. The ultrasound appointment was scheduled for 11 a.m., deliberately timed so I could pick up the sealed results on our way to his mother's house. The technician, a kind woman named Beth who'd seen me through 2 miscarriages, had squeezed my hand and whispered, "I'll rush this through for you, honey. You'll have your answer before dinner." By noon, I was standing in our kitchen, staring at Margaret's text message. "Don't forget the extra pies. We need enough for everyone." That emphasis on everyone twisted in my gut. 5 years of marriage, and I was still the outsider who needed reminders about portion sizes, still the woman who couldn't give the Hart family what they really wanted. Dylan loaded the car while I tucked the sealed white envelope deep into my coat pocket. The weight of it pressed against my ribs, my secret armor for whatever barbs Margaret had sharpened for today. The drive to Maple Lake House took 45 minutes through Ohio's gray November landscape. Dylan played talk radio to avoid conversation, occasionally drumming his fingers on the steering wheel, a nervous habit that emerged only before family gatherings. The closer we got to his childhood home, the smaller he seemed to become, shoulders hunching forward like a teenager preparing for lecture. "Mom's been stressed about the house renovations," he offered without prompting, his usual preemptive excuse for her behavior. Let's keep things smooth today." "Okay." I touched the envelope through my coat. "Smooth." Right. The Hart family lakeside house sprawled across 2 acres of prime real estate, all dark wood and floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the gunmetal lake. Cars already packed the circular driveway, Dylan's brother Cole's BMW, various cousins' SUVs, the familiar cluster that meant Margaret had summoned the full Hart clan for inspection. She met us at the door wearing her signature holiday ensemble cream cashmere and pearls, her silver hair styled in the same bob she'd worn since the 90s. Her smile was all teeth, no warmth. "Dylan, sweetheart." She pulled him into an embrace, then turned to me with that particular look she'd perfected acknowledgement without welcome. "Ava, you look tired. Those long hours at the lab must be wearing on you." "Clinical coordination," I corrected, as I had dozens of times. "I coordinate trials at Northwind Biotech, not work in a lab." "Of course." She'd already turned away, ushering Dylan inside while I stood holding 2 pie boxes and my carefully guarded secret. Inside, the house hummed with practiced heart harmony. Lena, Dylan's sister-in-law, had arranged her 3 children in matching sweater vests for photos. Cole poured bourbon for the men in the study. Cousins clustered around the kitchen island, their voices a familiar symphony of shared jokes and old stories, none of which included me. I set the pies on the counter and started arranging serving plates, falling into my assigned role of helpful but peripheral. Through the kitchen window, I watched the late afternoon light fade across the lake and felt my phone vibrate. A voicemail from the clinic. "Mrs. Hart, this is Beth. Just confirming your results are in the envelope as requested. Congratulations again. Remember what we discussed about stress management these next few weeks are crucial. Take care of yourself. I deleted the message, my fingers trembling slightly, and slipped back into the kitchen battlefield where Margaret was holding court, describing her latest charity board appointment to a circle of admiring relatives. When she caught my eye, her smile sharpened. "Ava, dear, why don't you skip the feta in that salad? Some of us need to avoid it, but you don't have those restrictions." The room quieted just enough for the words to land. I kept chopping vegetables, the knife steady in my hand, the envelope burning against my ribs, waiting for the perfect moment to detonate the truth that would shatter Margaret Hart's carefully constructed kingdom. The feta comment was just the beginning. Margaret moved through her house like a choreographer directing a cruel ballet, each gesture designed to remind me of my place or lack thereof. "Lena, show everyone Emma's honor roll certificate." Margaret beamed, pulling her daughter-in-law close. 3 children, and she still manages to keep them all excelling. That's what I call a real mother's touch. Lena had the grace to look uncomfortable, shifting her weight as she pulled out her phone. "It's really not that big a deal." Margaret. "Nonsense family achievements should be celebrated." Margaret's eyes found mine across the room. "All family achievements, whatever they might be." I excused myself to the bathroom, needing space to breathe. The powder room walls were covered in family photos: Dylan's childhood, Cole's wedding, Lena's maternity shoots, grandchildren at various stages of growth. 5 years of marriage, and not a single photo included me. I pressed my palm against the envelope in my pocket, feeling the sharp edges of the paper, grounding myself in its reality. When I returned, the living room had transformed into Margaret's personal gallery. She'd arranged everyone on the massive leather sectional, cousins' children on laps, the perfect family tableau. Dylan patted the space beside him, but Margaret intercepted. "Ava, would you mind getting the appetizers from the kitchen? You're so good at serving." The word hung in the air like a slap. Dylan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, just shifted his gaze to the window. Always the path of least resistance, always letting me absorb the blows meant for both of us. I served stuffed mushrooms and bacon-wrapped dates to people who barely acknowledged my presence, their conversations flowing around me like I was furniture. Margaret held court from her wingback chair, directing traffic, ensuring everyone knew their roles. When 7-year-old Emma asked why Aunt Ava didn't have any kids, the room went silent. "Some people just aren't meant for that blessing," Margaret said, her voice dripping false sympathy. "It's important to know one's limitations." "Mom." Dylan's protest was barely a whisper. "What, I'm simply being honest. Denial doesn't change reality." She turned to her sister Patricia. "Did I tell you about the Weatherbys? They finally accepted their situation and adopted. Sometimes you have to know when to explore other options." I set down the serving tray harder than necessary, the crack of silver on wood making everyone jump. "I need some air," I said. Outside, the November cold bit through my sweater, but I welcomed the sting. The lake stretched out dark and still, holding secrets beneath its surface, just like everyone inside that house. My phone buzzed another text from Margaret in the family group chat I'd been reluctantly added to, running low on wine. Someone should make a store run. The someone was never ambiguous in Margaret's messages. Through the window, I watched them laughing. Dylan animated in a way he never was at home, falling back into the role of favorite son. Cole said something that made everyone roar with laughter, and even from outside, I could see Margaret's satisfied smile, her kingdom intact, her subjects loyal, the barren wife relegated to the cold. I pulled out my phone and opened the recording app. 3 weeks ago, after too many glasses of wine at a restaurant, Lena had accidentally played a voice message from Margaret on speaker. I'd been returning from the bathroom, stopping just out of sight when I heard my mother-in-law's voice. "She's dragging him down. Lena, a man needs legacy, children. If she can't provide that, Dylan needs to think about his future. There are plenty of women who'd give him what he deserves." I'd recorded the entire thing on my phone from around the corner Lena's weak protests. Margaret's insistence that sometimes love isn't enough, and most damningly, her suggestion that Dylan was already considering his options with someone from his office. Now, standing in the cold, I added it to my arsenal alongside the ultrasound. Margaret Hart had built her power on the assumption that everyone would follow her rules, play their assigned roles. She'd never considered that the woman she'd dismissed as barren might be carrying not just her grandchild, but the evidence to destroy her carefully maintained facade. When I walked back inside, cheeks flushed from cold, Margaret barely glanced up. "Did you get the wine?" "No," I said simply, taking my seat at the table. "I was busy preparing something else." She frowned at my empty hands, but before she could respond, someone called out that dinner was ready. The family began moving toward the dining room, and I touched the envelope one more time. Soon. Margaret. Very soon. The dining room migration was a practiced ritual, everyone knowing their assigned seats from years of family dinners. Margaret positioned herself at the head of the table, naturally, with Dylan at her right hand, the prince to her queen. I was relegated to the middle, between Cousin Janet's teenage son who spent every meal on his phone, and Great Aunt Dolores who was half-deaf and fully disinterested in anyone under 60. As I settled into my chair, Lena's phone buzzed on the sideboard where she'd left it while wrangling her youngest into a high chair. The screen lit up, displaying a notification from Hart Family No Ava group chat. My stomach clenched, but I kept my face neutral as Lena rushed to silence it, her cheeks flaming red. "Sorry, everyone. Mom brain." She laughed nervously, snatching the phone, but not before I glimpsed part of Margaret's message. "Remember what we discussed. Don't mention babies." Dylan saw it too. I watched him process the information, his fork pausing midway to his mouth, then continuing as if nothing had happened. Always the coward. Always choosing comfort over confrontation. "Before we begin," Margaret announced, tapping her wine glass, "I want to share some wonderful news. The Fertility Hope Foundation has asked me to join their board of directors. Ironic, isn't it?" Her gaze found mine across the table. Me, counseling couples about family planning when I was blessed with such easy pregnancies. Both my boys, no complications, no struggles. "That's wonderful, Mom," Cole said, shooting me an apologetic glance that somehow made it worse. "They specifically wanted someone who could provide emotional support to women dealing with difficulties," Margaret continued. "I told them about the importance of acceptance. Sometimes God's plan doesn't include motherhood for everyone, and that's perfectly valid." The words were kind on the surface, but her tone made them a scalpel, precise and cutting. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket, another call from the clinic. I let it go to voicemail, my hand brushing the envelope instead. "Speaking of family planning," Lena said, clearly trying to change the subject, "Cole and I have been thinking about trying for number 4. The table erupted in congratulations. Margaret clasped her hands together, eyes shining with genuine joy. "Oh, darling, how wonderful! The more the merrier. Children are such a blessing. Those who have them understand the true meaning of legacy." That's when I heard a conversation from the kitchen where some of the younger cousins had gathered to pour wine. They hadn't realized how voices carried in the old house. "Feel bad for Dylan, though," someone said. "Stuck with a wife who can't even—" "Mom says he's been texting that girl from his office, the one from the Denver trip. Can you blame him, man wants kids, if Ava can't deliver?" I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood. "Excuse me, I need to check on something." In the kitchen, the cousins fell silent as I entered. I recognized Madison and Tyler, both in their 20s, both regular recipients of Margaret's gossip. They studied their wine glasses like they contained the secrets of the universe. "Interesting conversation," I said calmly, pulling my phone out. "Tyler, wasn't it you who needed a recommendation letter from my company last year? For that internship?" He paled. "Ava, we didn't mean—" "And Madison, how's your nursing program going? Still hoping to get into the clinical trials unit at Northwind." I smiled, sweet as arsenic. Funny how opportunities can appear or disappear. They scattered like roaches when lights turn on, leaving me alone in Margaret's pristine kitchen. I pulled up the voicemail from the clinic, listening to Beth's warm voice confirm again what the envelope contained. Viable pregnancy, 6 weeks, strong heartbeat. Congratulations, Mrs. Hart. Through the doorway, I could see the dining room, Margaret still holding court, explaining to the table how she'd been counseling a poor woman at church who'd been trying for 5 years. I told her, "Honey, sometimes you have to accept that your body is telling you something. Not everyone is meant to be a mother." She cried, "Of course, but truth is kindness in the long run." Dylan's knuckles were white around his fork. For a moment, I thought he might finally say something, might finally defend me. Instead, he reached for his wine, drowning whatever words had almost escaped. I opened my recording app again, making sure I had everything Margaret's voice message to Lena, the cousin's conversation about Dylan's supposed office romance, and now, her cruel sermon about women who couldn't conceive. My evidence folder was complete. The envelope in my pocket held the future, but my phone held the weapon that would clear the path to it. Walking back to the dining room, I made a decision. Margaret Hart had spent years building her narrative about my empty womb. It was time to show everyone exactly how full my hands were. "Sorry about that," I said, retaking my seat. "Important call from the clinic." Margaret's eyes sharpened. "On Thanksgiving. How inconvenient." "Actually," I said, placing my phone on the table next to my plate. "It was about timing. Timing is everything. Don't you think?" The golden turkey sat at the center of the table like a prop in Margaret's perfectly staged production. She carved it with surgical precision, each slice falling perfectly onto the platter while Dylan held it steady their annual choreography that excluded me by design. "Such a beautiful bird this year," Aunt Patricia cooed. "Remember when the boys were little? Margaret, they'd fight over the wishbone." "Dylan always won," Margaret said, smiling at her son. "He knew what he wanted and went after it." "That's what Hart men do. They get what they deserve." The cranberry sauce made its way around the table, followed by green beans glistening with almonds, sweet potato casserole topped with perfect peaks of marshmallow. Every dish had a story, a memory that predated me, roots I could never grow into. I watched the familiar dance of plates and serving spoons, the comfortable rhythm of a family that knew exactly who belonged and who didn't. "Ava, you're not eating much," Lena observed, her voice pitched with false concern. "Are you feeling all right?" Before I could answer, Margaret laughed. "She's probably on another one of those fertility diets, pomegranate seeds and Brazil nuts. Right, I read about them in my research for the foundation. Desperate women will try anything." The word desperate hung in the air like a challenge. I took a slow sip of water, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make people uncomfortable. "Actually, I've been avoiding certain foods for different reasons," I said evenly. Margaret's fork paused midway to her mouth. "Oh, have you finally given up? That's very mature of you. Accepting reality." "Mom," Dylan said weakly. "What I'm being supportive. Acceptance is the first step toward healing." She turned to the table at large. "I was just telling the foundation board about the importance of letting go. Some women waste their entire lives chasing something that was never meant to be." Cole cleared his throat. "Should we say what we're thankful for? That's tradition, right?" "Wonderful idea," Margaret said, clearly pleased to redirect the conversation to safer ground. "I'll start. I'm thankful for my beautiful family, my 2 successful sons, my 3 soon-to-be 4 perfect grandchildren, and for all the blessings God has seen fit to grant those of us who deserve them." The specificity of her gratitude was a masterclass in exclusion. Around the table, others shared their thanks: health, jobs, family. When it reached Dylan, he mumbled something about being grateful for opportunities to grow while carefully avoiding my eyes. My turn. The table watched me with the mixture of pity and discomfort I'd grown accustomed to over the years. "I'm thankful for truth," I said simply, "and for perfect timing." Margaret's smile tightened. "How abstract?" "Oh, I can be more specific." I placed my hand on my phone. "I'm thankful for modern technology that lets us capture important moments, and for medical advances that reveal things some people might prefer stayed hidden." "Are you feeling well, dear?" Margaret's voice dripped false concern. "You seem a bit emotional. It must be hard, watching Lena plan for her fourth while you're still struggling." That was the moment, the crack in the door I'd been waiting for. I let my hand rest on my pocket, feeling the envelope's edges. "You know what else I'm thankful for?" I continued. "I'm thankful for clarity, for finally seeing people as they really are, not as they pretend to be." The uncomfortable shifting around the table was almost musical. Forks clinked against plates. Wine glasses were refilled with unusual frequency. The teenagers looked between adults' faces, sensing drama but not understanding its source. "Speaking of family blessings," Margaret said, her voice sharp as the carving knife, "Janet's daughter just announced her pregnancy. Her third. Isn't that wonderful? Some women are just naturally fertile. It's in their genes, their body's way of saying they're meant for motherhood. Unlike others," Madison added, emboldened by wine and Margaret's obvious approval, "who maybe should consider other life purposes." "Exactly," Margaret said, pointing her fork at Madison approvingly. "Not everyone can be a mother. Some women are meant for other things. Career women, for instance. Although," she paused, looking directly at me, "I'm not sure coordinating drug trials really counts as a meaningful contribution to society, not like raising the next generation." Dylan's hand clenched around his napkin. I watched him swallow words again, storing them in that place where he kept all the things he should have said over the years. "You're absolutely right, Margaret," I said, my voice steady as granite. "Not everyone can be a mother. It requires strength, courage, and the ability to protect what's yours, qualities that some people only pretend to have." The table fell silent. Even the children seemed to sense the electricity in the air. Margaret's face flushed, her composure cracking just slightly. "Are you implying something?" "Ava." I smiled, sweet as her cranberry sauce and twice as sharp. "I never imply." "Margaret, I prefer facts." "Speaking of which, shall we discuss what makes someone truly barren besides a soul?" "Of course." Margaret's composure shattered like fine china hitting marble. She stood slowly, her hands braced against the table, her voice rising to fill the room with its venom. "Barren," she said, enunciating each letter like a curse. "Let me be clear since you seem confused. Ava, barren, empty, fruitless. That's what you are. 5 years of marriage to my son, and what do you have to show for it? Nothing but medical bills and disappointment." The room collectively held its breath. Even the children had gone silent, sensing the violence in words they didn't understand. "Margaret," Aunt Patricia whispered, "perhaps—" "No," Margaret cut her off. "I'm tired of dancing around it. Everyone here knows the truth. Dylan deserves children. He deserves a legacy. And she," her finger pointed at me like a weapon, "she's denying him that basic right." "Mom, stop!" Dylan's voice was barely audible. "Stop! Stop protecting her feelings while she destroys your future." Margaret's carefully styled hair had come loose, gray strands falling across her face. "I've watched you shrink yourself for her inadequacy. I've seen the way you look at your brother's children, the longing in your eyes. And for what? To spare the feelings of a woman whose body has failed its most fundamental purpose." Lena covered her youngest daughter's ears. Cole stood up. "Mom, that's enough." "It's not enough." Margaret's voice cracked. "Do you know what people say? At church, at the club, they pity us. They whisper about the heart boy with the barren wife. They wonder what's wrong with her, what defect she's hiding. There's nothing wrong with medical conditions, Dolores said quietly, but Margaret steamrolled over her. A medical condition that prevents you from giving your husband children is nature's way of saying you're not meant to breed. It's Darwin. Simple selection. Some women are built for motherhood, and others, she looked at me with undisguised contempt, are evolutionary dead ends. I felt Dylan flinch beside me, but still, he said nothing. His silence was louder than Margaret's cruelty. And you? Margaret turned on her son. You're too weak to do what needs to be done. Any real man would have found a solution by now. The Hamilton son left his barren wife last year, and now he has twins with his new bride. That's what a heart should do, ensure the family line continues. You want him to leave his wife? Lena gasped. I want him to fulfill his potential. Margaret was fully unleashed now, years of filtered thoughts pouring out like poison. Yes, I told him to consider his options. Yes, I introduced him to that lovely fertile girl from the Denver conference, because somebody has to think about this family's future since Ava clearly can't contribute to it. The admission hung in the air. Several cousins exchanged shocked looks. Even Madison seemed to shrink into her chair. You know what the saddest part is, Margaret continued, her voice dropping to a cruel whisper. She keeps trying, those pathetic treatments, the hormones, the procedures, like a dog trying to walk on broken legs. It's embarrassing. Just accept what you are. Ava, barren, empty, a genetic cul-de-sac. She paused, seeming to savor her words. I've already talked to my lawyer about protecting Dylan's assets when he finally comes to his senses. The house is in his name only. Thank God, you'll get nothing, which is fitting since that's exactly what you've given this family. Nothing. Tyler dropped his fork. It clattered against his plate, the sound sharp in the silence. Margaret straightened her sweater, trying to reclaim some dignity. There. Someone finally said what everyone's been thinking. The truth may hurt, but lies hurt worse. Ava is barren, and she's wasting my son's life. She sat back down, smoothing her napkin across her lap as if she'd simply commented on the weather. Now, who wants pie? The silence that followed was deafening. No one moved. No one breathed. All eyes turned to me, waiting for tears, for collapse, for the breakdown Margaret clearly expected. Instead, I reached into my pocket, my fingers closing around the envelope. The paper was warm from being pressed against my body all evening, like it had absorbed my rage and transformed it into something harder, sharper. You're absolutely right, Margaret, I said, my voice steady as steel. Someone should have told the truth a long time ago. I pulled out my phone first, setting it on the table with deliberate slowness. Then, with everyone watching, I drew out the white envelope, holding it up so the clinic's logo was visible to everyone. Barren, I repeated, tasting the word. Such an interesting choice of words. Tell me, Margaret, what would you call a woman who's been hiding her pregnancy just to watch her mother-in-law destroy herself at her own dinner table? The color drained from Margaret's face so fast I thought she might faint. Because I have another word for it, I continued, pulling the ultrasound from the envelope with theatrical slowness. I call it poetic justice. The ultrasound image slid across the polished walnut table like a playing card dealt by fate itself. It came to rest perfectly centered between the turkey platter and Margaret's wine glass, the black and white swirls unmistakable even upside down to those seated across from me. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. Then Lena gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh my God, is that 6 weeks? I said calmly. Strong heartbeat, perfect measurements, due in July. Margaret's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. Her perfectly manicured hand reached toward the image, trembling, then pulled back as if it might burn her. You're lying, she whispered. The clinic's number is on the envelope, I said, sliding that across too. Call them yourself. Ask for Beth. She's been my technician through everything, the 2 miscarriages you called God's way of saying no, the failed IVF cycles you described as throwing good money after bad, and now this. This successful pregnancy you just called impossible. Dylan stood so abruptly his chair toppled backward. His face was a kaleidoscope of emotions: shock, joy, rage, shame. You're pregnant. You're actually... His voice broke. When did you find out? This morning, 11:15 a.m., to be exact. I kept my eyes on Margaret. I wanted to share the news with family at dinner, but then I thought, why interrupt Margaret's performance? She was on such a roll. Cole picked up the ultrasound with reverent hands. This is real. This is... Jesus Christ. Mom, what have you done? But she's barren, Margaret said faintly, as if repeating it might make it true. The doctor said Dylan told me the doctor said we had a 5% chance without intervention. I corrected. Not 0. Never 0. But you heard what you wanted to hear. Didn't you? Built your whole narrative around it. The barren wife, the failed woman, the evolutionary dead end. Tyler had his phone out, zooming in on the ultrasound. Holy shit, there's really a baby in there. Language, his mother snapped automatically, but her eyes were fixed on Margaret's crumbling face. All those things you said, Aunt Patricia breathed, looking at her sister with something like horror. About Darwin and breeding and Margaret. How could you... But more importantly, I continued, pulling my phone into my hand, let's discuss what else you said about Dylan's options. About that fertile girl from Denver. I swiped to my recording app. Would anyone like to hear Margaret's exact words about how Dylan should handle his barren wife situation? You recorded me. Margaret's voice pitched high with hysteria. No, I said. Lena did. Accidentally. 3 weeks ago at Bernardino's. You remember, don't you? Lena. When you played that voice message on speaker by mistake, Lena went white. I didn't mean... I know you didn't. I pressed play. Margaret's recorded voice filled the dining room, tinny but clear through my phone speaker. She's dragging him down. Lena, a man needs legacy, children. If she can't provide that, Dylan needs to think about his future. Michelle from his office is interested. I made sure of that at the conference. She's 28, healthy. Comes from a big family. Good breeding stock. Sometimes you have to cut your losses with defective merchandise. I stopped the recording. Defective merchandise. That's what you called me. The mother of your grandchild. Dylan grabbed the edge of the table like he might collapse. Mom, you tried to set me up with Michelle. You actually... I was thinking of your future. Margaret shrieked. You deserve children. I'm having one, Dylan roared, finally finding his voice. My wife is pregnant, and you just called her a genetic dead end in front of our entire family. Madison started crying. 2 of the teenagers had their phones out, and I knew this disaster was about to become Hart family legend. But perhaps my favorite part, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos, was when you told your charity board that you were counseling a poor barren woman at church. There is no woman at church, is there? Margaret, you were talking about me, using my pain as your charity credential. How dare you? No! I stood up, my hand protectively over my stomach. How dare you? How dare you sit at this table, eating the food I helped prepare, smiling at your grandchildren, while plotting to destroy my marriage? How dare you call yourself a Christian while praying for my womb to stay empty? How dare you call yourself a mother while trying to orphan your own grandchild before it's even born? The ultrasound lay between us like evidence at a trial. Margaret stared at it, her face aging years in moments. That's my grandchild, she whispered. No, I said firmly. That's my child. Dylan's child. You don't get to claim it now, not after everything you've said and done. You want to talk about barren look in the mirror. Margaret, You're the one with nothing growing inside you but bitterness and bile. I pulled a folded document from my inner coat pocket, the letter from Dr. Martinez I'd requested just yesterday, knowing I'd need ammunition beyond the ultrasound. Let me read you something. Margaret, I said, unfolding the paper with deliberate care. This is from my obstetrician. Mrs. Hart's pregnancy is considered high risk due to previous losses. Stress is a significant factor in early pregnancy complications. It is medically advisable that she avoid hostile environments and individuals who cause emotional distress. I set the letter on the table. That means you, Margaret. Your toxicity is literally a medical hazard to your grandchild. You can't keep me from my grandchild, Margaret said, but her voice had lost its power. Thin and reedy now. Actually, I pulled out my phone again, this time opening my email. Dylan and I have been seeing a counselor at Riverton Family Wellness, did you know that? Dylan. He looked stunned. I've been going alone, documenting everything, every insulting text, every public humiliation, every attempt to undermine our marriage. Dr. Patterson has quite a file, and yesterday, she helped me draft this. I showed them the email on my screen. It's a formal boundary agreement. From this moment forward, any contact between Margaret Hart and Ava Hart must go through Dylan. Any attempt at direct contact will be considered harassment. Any more recorded instances of defamation calling me barren, defective, or any other slander will result in legal action. Cole whistled low. You got a lawyer. I got 3 lawyers, I corrected. Turns out when you work at a biotech company, you meet a lot of people who understand reproductive discrimination. One specializes in hostile family dynamics. Another handles defamation. The third, I smiled coldly at Margaret. She's very interested in your charity board position. Something about misrepresentation and using false narratives for personal gain. You vindictive little... Careful, I warned. Lena's still recording, aren't you? Lena held up her phone with shaking hands. I didn't mean to, but after you played that first recording, I just started. Good instinct. I turned back to Margaret. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to resign from the Fertility Hope Foundation board. Tomorrow. You'll cite personal reasons. I will not. You will, I continued, because if you don't, I'll send them the full recording of tonight's dinner. Let them hear their newest board member calling struggling women desperate and defective merchandise. I'm sure they'll love the Darwin breeding selection speech especially. Patricia gasped. Margaret, your reputation? Exactly. I nodded. Your reputation, the thing you value above everything, including your son's happiness. So, here's my offer, the only one you'll get. You back off completely. No more family group chats about me. No more friendly suggestions about my marriage. No more comments about my body, my fertility, or my worth as a woman. You respect the boundaries I've set, or I take everything tonight's recordings, 3 years of documented abuse, and this letter from my doctor to both your charity boards and your church leadership. That's blackmail, Margaret hissed. No, it's consequences. I picked up the ultrasound, holding it up to the light so everyone could see the tiny bean-shaped promise of life. You called me barren in front of 23 people tonight. 23 witnesses to your cruelty. That's not blackmail. Margaret, that's evidence. Dylan finally found his voice again. Mom, take the deal. She spun on him. You're supporting this ambush. You tried to set me up with another woman. He slammed his hand on the table, making dishes jump. You called my pregnant wife defective merchandise. What did you think would happen? I thought you'd choose family. I am choosing family, Dylan said quietly. My wife, my child, the family I'm building, not the one that tears people down. The room held its breath. Even the children seemed to understand they were witnessing something momentous, the Hart family hierarchy crumbling in real time. There's one more thing, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. If you ever make my child feel unwanted, unloved, or less than perfect, I will rain hellfire on your life in ways you can't imagine. I've been documenting everything for 3 years. Margaret, every cruel comment, every manipulation, every attempt to destroy my marriage. That's my insurance policy. That's my promise. Margaret looked around the table for support, but found only averted eyes and disappointed faces. Even Madison, her earlier ally, wouldn't meet her gaze. "You've destroyed everything," Margaret whispered. "No," I said, folding the ultrasound back into its envelope with gentle reverence. "I've set terms. Clear, simple terms for coexistence. You can be a grandmother, Margaret, or you can be a memory we never mention. Your choice." I stood, my hand finding Dylan's shoulder. "We're leaving now. When you're ready to apologize, really apologize. Not just to perform damage control, Dylan will let me know. Until then, remember, I'm not the one who's barren here. I'm growing life while you're killing relationships." I walked back to my chair and carefully placed the ultrasound in the center of the table, right where Margaret's authority used to sit. Then I reached into my pocket for the duplicate copy I'd made, knowing this moment would come. "This one's for you, Margaret," I said, setting it down with deliberate precision. "So you don't forget what you almost lost tonight." Dylan stood beside me, and for the first time in our marriage, I felt him truly choose. His hand found mine, fingers interlacing with a strength that had been absent for years. "Mom," he said, his voice carrying a finality that made Margaret flinch. "From today forward, I choose my wife. I choose my child. And if you ever speak about Ava that way again, you won't just lose access to your grandchild. You'll lose your son." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Margaret's hand trembled as she reached for the ultrasound copy, her fingers barely grazing the edge of the paper as if it might burn her. The paper rustled in the silence, as loud as thunder. "But I'm your mother," she whispered. "And Ava's my wife. The mother of your grandchild. The woman you just called barren in front of our entire family." Dylan's voice broke slightly. "Do you understand what you've done? Do you understand what you almost destroyed?" Cole cleared his throat. "Dylan's right. Mom, this has gone too far. We've all enabled it for too long, letting you say these things, thinking it was just family dynamics. But this isn't love. This is cruelty." "Even I can see that," Lena added quietly. "And I've tried so hard to keep the peace." "But there is no peace when someone's humanity is constantly under attack." Margaret's carefully constructed world was collapsing brick by brick. The matriarch who'd ruled through judgment and shame sat shrinking in her chair, suddenly looking every one of her 58 years and more. I pulled on my coat, the November cold calling through the windows. One last thing. Margaret. That fertile girl from Denver, Michelle, I called her yesterday. Told her everything. She was horrified that you'd tried to use her as a weapon against another woman. She's blocked Dylan's number and filed a complaint with HR about potential harassment. So that door you tried to open, it's not just closed, it's barricaded. The gasp that escaped Margaret was small, defeated. The queen had been dethroned by her own cruelty, and everyone at the table knew it. As we walked toward the door, Great Aunt Dolores, who'd been silent through the entire confrontation, suddenly spoke up, her voice carrying the weight of decades. "Margaret, I buried 2 babies before I had my son. If anyone had called me barren during those dark years, I would have never forgiven them. You're lucky Ava's giving you any chance at all." We stopped at the threshold. I turned back one final time, taking in the wreckage of the perfect family dinner. The turkey sat cooling, the carefully arranged side dishes growing cold, the pie untouched. But more than the meal was ruined, the carefully maintained facade of the Hart family perfection lay in pieces. "Happy Thanksgiving, everyone," I said, one hand protective over my stomach where my child grew despite every cruel word, every attempt to diminish me. "May you all get exactly what you deserve." The cold November air hit us as we stepped outside, but I barely felt it. The weight I'd carried for 5 years had been lifted, transferred back to the woman who'd tried to bury me under it. Dylan stopped at the car, pulling me into an embrace that shook with suppressed sobs. "I'm sorry," he whispered into my hair. "I'm so sorry I let her that I never— God, Ava, you're pregnant. We're having a baby." "We are," I confirmed, letting him hold me, feeling him choose us finally, definitively choose us over the toxic loyalty that had nearly destroyed everything. Behind us, through the windows of Maple Lake House, I could see the family still frozen around the table, Margaret holding that ultrasound photo like evidence of her own crimes. Some were crying, others were leaving. The Hart family Thanksgiving would never be the same. As we drove away, Dylan reached over and took my hand. "That recording of Mom trying to set me up with Michelle, how long have you had it?" 3 weeks, I admitted. I was waiting for the right moment. "And the pregnancy. When did you really find out?" I smiled, watching the dark trees flash past. "Yesterday at 4:30 p.m. I had them rush the results so I'd have them today." "You planned all of this, every word," I said. "Margaret taught me something valuable over the years. When someone shows you who they are, believe them, and when they declare war on your worth as a woman, you don't defend, you destroy." Dylan squeezed my hand. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." "Just remember to choose us," I said simply. "Choose your family, your real family, and you'll never have to see that side again." The ultrasound in my pocket pressed against my ribs, the promise of new life growing stronger than any curse Margaret Hart could cast. I'd entered that house as the Barren wife. I left it as the woman who'd brought a dynasty to its knees with nothing but the truth and perfect timing. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold. Sometimes it's served at exactly 98.6 degrees, with a heartbeat that no amount of cruelty could silence. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Drop a comment and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. What would you have done in Ava's situation? Your stories and perspectives mean everything to this community.